If you have a good knowledge of Joomla's API, you will know that it has a means by which it builds its forms. The forms that you use in your component. And it's basically done through what is called an XML file. Now, I can show you that XML file, but maybe this is a little bit too soon. So all I'll tell you is that Component Builder basically builds that XML file and place it in the right place so that your module and view and controller can access that file through the Joomla API, and with it builds the fields which you would use in a view. So we need to define a few terms. What is a view? What is a field? What is a component? All those kind of things. So we would like to start with what is known as field types. There is always a field type needed if you are building a field. Field types, if we were to just go to Joomla itself and maybe create a new article, you basically, this is what we would call a view. In fact, even the URL, which I suppose you can't see, let me scroll down a bit there. The URL says that it's in a view. It says view equals article. Okay, so this is an article view. If you close this and you see a list of, oh, there's no articles here, it's a blank website, then this is a list of articles, and it's articles plural. So if you create one, it's article single, and if it's the list of the articles, it's plural. Both of these are seen as views. So this is the list view, and if you click on new, this is what we would call the edit view or the single view. So your components mostly will have these two views in the backend when it comes to your different data sets. Now, this title here is what we would call a text view. The alias here was also a text view. This editor block here is what we would call the, sorry, not text view, I mean text field. And this editor here is also called a text editor field. This is a list field. This is a radio field, another list field, another list field. This is a tag field. This is a text field. And so you have all these fields. This is a date field. This is a user field. This is a text field. This is a text area, a text area, text field, list, so on. So we can continue. This is a normal text field, but it's got a certain feature called read only added to it. As we will see, these things are all in place in our application for you to make use of all these different changes that can be made with one type of field. So these are all seen as fields, and they all live inside a view. So that's one concept that is quite important for you to realize, that you have fields which live in views. Now, you might not think that the list view has fields, and you're partly right. It more displays these fields. So let's do a dummy test article here. I think that's about all I need to fill in. Save and close. So we at least have a list item. But that is also a field. That is a field. And if you were to click on search options, all these are fields. And so your list view also has certain fields which are primarily only available in the list view. In the list view is also the place where we do most of our features for a multiple items, whereas while opening one item you would do what's only required for one item. Okay, and then there is obviously a table here which is part of the list view. Now, Component Builder sets up the backend list view and edit view for you based on the fields and how you map them into your view. We will look at each of those concepts more deeply, but I need to have you understand from which angle we are coming. We are gonna try and show you that inside of this article you will be creating fields, even put them into different tabs, which will eventually be rendered in a specific order in Joomla, in the component when it's being compiled through component builder. Okay, so that's using Joomla's own article manager as sort of an example. But we could just as well gone to component builder. Since it has the demo the demo application in it, we can select the demo, compile it. It says that there's a copy warning. This is because we haven't set some options in the global settings. It doesn't mean that there's been an error in the compiling. It just means it couldn't move the file to the Git repository. You see, we selected this Git thing here, and also that one. If we've unselected those, so let's start again, and we unselect those and we only do a compile, you see it doesn't give you the same warning because it's not trying to move things around, and since that it couldn't move the others because there are global settings that we haven't set. We'll look at those in a moment. So now we could just click install, and it is installed the component into this Joomla site. Now as you'll see, it doesn't have any images because we don't ship the images with the components that are sent as demo. So unfortunately at this stage we might change that in the future. But you already have your demo component running. If you click on add a look, it will open the edit view. If you click on looks, it will open a list view of where the looks will be displayed. We added an import feature which your normal Joomla components don't have. We will explain that later. But if we click new, you'd see that we have a text field here, a radio button. If I add something to the text field, it opens an alias field, which is also a text field. We have a repeatable field in here, and we can add information to this, and that is sort of a look at the fields that is in the demo component. And so these are all fields, and they are mapped into the component through Joomla's infrastructure. That if we go to admin views, there is look. If you open look, it has in it those fields we just looked at, right? There's the name, there's the alias, acronym, all this information we just looked at, and they are all mapped into this view through the field add button here. The reason why these two are, why you're not adding them through this area, is because this simply is to edit existing fields instead of adding them. So if you were to open a admin view, you can edit them from here, and it's maybe easier to get to those fields, especially if you have many components already. You'll have many fields, and this is a way to sort of just look at the fields related to this component's view. Okay, so if you were to add more fields, you would open this box, and this is where you'll be adding fields. I see we are missing one. Possibly I need to ensure that it's with the export that it's being dropped out. I'll look at that. Okay, now let's step back to field types, because that's really where it all starts. We've already added all the field types that I think you would need. The field types are basically mapping to the libraries inside of Joomla. Joomla has many field types, and for each field type which you build, you need to set certain values in an XML document. These values are, for example, if you use checkbox, set up in properties. So you have these certain changing properties that you can adjust for each field. So this is This is only the properties for the checkbox field. Now you might wonder if you need to set these, and most of the time you would never need to do that unless you become advanced. You would want to add more field types which we haven't covered, or if you want to extend the existing field types. But for the most part you would not probably need to tinker with this. I am simply trying to explain to you where field type comes from and the amazing scalability that exists. You see, with most other component builders you need to wait for the developer to add a new field type, whereas in this one you can add your own field type, which simply needs to map to Joomla's library and the way that they have their field types set. Now there are certain field types like a repeatable field, which is quite tricky and needs special attention even in the code of the compiler. But the majority of field types are very straightforward and simple to implement, and we have implemented those already. We have not implemented all the attributes that can be targeted though, and those would be the ones that you might need to come and add if you want to use them. For example, I added this show on option quite recently to all field types, which I found because this is a way of showing and hiding fields based on other fields' values. And although we have a very excellent application in place in Component Builder to take control of those features of showing and hiding fields, this is an added feature which Joomla itself actually has. And if we can, in a component that we are developing, if we can use show on instead of the Component Builder's version, I would obviously suggest we do that. And nonetheless, I would still explain much more on this topic as we continue. So just briefly, let me start here at the top. You have name, which is called type, and a value called checkbox, and it must be set to not adjustable because that is the way Joomla expects it. Now if you don't understand any of this information that I'm showing you here, then a place to go to is this URL. Let me open that for you. It's called the form fields. You'll see a whole list of form fields, and these are the same form fields you just saw in our application. If I was to take checkbox, where is it? It's up. Here it is, checkbox. Is this checkboxes? No, single checkbox. Okay, if I would open that, you'd see that they give you a list of those fields, type, name, and they tell you what is mandatory and what is optional. And basically we are just mapping those data into this form here. And if we want to add another attribute, you just click on the plus and it creates a new field, and we add the name, add the value, tweak these switches in correspondence, and some information. This is really for yourself, this information block here. We put information there when later when you use this field type, you are reminded what this specific attribute is for. And I basically took this information by copying it right here from Joomla's website and placed it in there. And where I felt there might be more said, I added some custom text to it. And what these values will do is it'll create an XML string like that in your form, which Joomla then uses to build those forms. So basically we first set up a field type by telling you which input values would be able to use for this specific field type, which at this stage is checkboxes. And then we save this, and then later you can reuse this field type when you start creating fields. So let me just close this checkbox and go to text field. And you'll see that here is a list of the fields that used text field as its type. Now you can open one of these fields, And here at the bottom you see something very similar. If I was to go back here and go to text field on Joomla's website, you see that it shows you examples of how that XML line should look like. See? Now, here in the field area where you've created the field, you basically gave the field a name. This is just for the system. The name used here is the one that is important. That should be the correct name, the label. This name is just that when you add it to your view, you know this is what we use to identify it. We'll still explain adding it to the view in more detail. This data type and things we'll also explain when we go into more depth around what a field is and how to build one. I'm simply now looking at field types and showing you how the changes that you've made in field type affects fields that you would build with that type. So here is that detail that was in field type. Remember, on change, and it tells you what is mandatory and what is optional, but that's basically because I placed it in the description, right? I mean, we can click close to go back to that field type, and then click on property, and we'll see that I added optional and mandatory to the description so that I can know, is this optional or mandatory? Yes, you could possibly argue that I should have done it from here and that shouldn't be necessary to add it there, but you know, this settings here is used when we compile the component, whereas this here is used for you to know what this field attribute is all about. And maybe as we continue to develop this component, I might make a change to that, but I wouldn't make such a change that it affects anything that already exists dramatically in any way. Okay, so let's go back to a field. The way the compiler works, doesn't really grab this string and just puts it into the XML. In fact, if I show you how a string looks that the compiler has built, wrong window. Let's go to a string that the compiler has built. Assessment type. You'd see that it is completely reformatted. The label is turned into a translatable string, so has it been done with the description. It also tells you where in the compiler, we'll still look at that because this might sometimes show and sometimes you can tweak your component that it doesn't show it. But it tells you, in which line in the compiler it was built and also in which file, which is very nice. I think those of you that are developers will appreciate this feature tremendously. It also tells you the field type. So obviously, as you can see, and as we scroll through this, you can see that Component Builder really goes way out of its way to reconstruct that that field. It is not using this directly. It in fact grabs that area and that to determine that this is a text field. So it actually is really dependent on that part, which is up to name, come now, and that part there. So the opening exclamation and the closing one and the value in between those is what is used. So if you for by accident drop off this or that, it will still work perfectly. These are really the only things that are really needed, and part of what I am hoping to achieve eventually is that this becomes just input fields like these, and yet I'm wondering if I should go that way. The fact that they're all in one big text area leaves us with a lot of room and freedom to really adjust it easily without major complications. In any case, if you start a new field, which we will look at later, it populates this with the demo data. And the demo data is actually values that you set when you create a field type. You see, there it is. The demo is this value or example that is placed here. It's from these values that it if you create a new text field, it grabs these values as the values which you can then adjust to your purpose of implementation for that specific field at that moment. If you leave it blank, it will also build it without any value between those two exclamation marks. Okay, that is looking at field types. I'm not going to spend much more time on this, primarily because all the field types has been set up and you hardly ever would need to come here and change things unless you really want to do your own thing, and then you will be able to do that without my help, I suppose. So our next tutorial will be on how to use field types in fields. Thank you for watching.